I'm going to talk about the omerta and the difficulties for whistleblowers in the problematics of hyperflexion. So I'm Eva Van Avermaet. I'm a veterinary. Since 20 years I did my studies in Ghent. I'm Flemish, so that's where my accent comes from. I am the founder of the Collectif Pour, Chevaux, and I will tell you a little bit the story of how all this went since 3 years for me, and particularly the difficulties I have had as a whistleblower. I would like to start with this quote of the equine scientist Tanja Bornman. It's much easier to go with the flow than against it. To go against the flow requires more energy, strength and perseverance, but it's worthwhile. It's about time to embrace change and to speak up if you notice bad horse welfare, starting at your local riding school, boarding barn or show level. It's vital for the future of our sport and, most importantly, for the welfare of our horses." Unquote. Maître Nathalie Moulinas did not use the term whistleblower in my court case about defamation because the second part of the definition does not always apply to what I do. I am a person who reports or discloses, without direct financial consideration and in good faith, information. But the information is not always relating to a crime, an offense, a threat or harm to the public interest. The judge presiding my court case did, however, use the term whistleblower. The certificate that was written by Professor Vorov following my court case contains a description which better defines what I do. I am a critical voice that takes part in public debates and that reveals illegal or unethical practices by institutions, public persons, corporate organizations, or private persons. I think that as a vet, we have not only the right, but the duty to speak up when we witness unethical practices. The problem is, speaking up in the horse industry implies being ridiculed or facing aggressive reactions from clients and colleagues. Speaking up means at best stepping out of your comfort zone, at worst putting at risk your employment. There is an omerta, a code of silence, which seals lips concerning bad practices in horse sport. Because of this omerta, for many years I worked in a situation where my personal values were not in line with what I witnessed every day. This inner conflict of values is one of the reasons why several of my colleagues have quit being a horse vet. The omerta and the inner conflict, the feeling of being powerless in the face of bad practices, also made many of us deserting the competition grounds, leaving the horses without protection. The system to protect horses on showgrounds is not working. It's working the other way around, protecting riders harming their horses from people trying to protect those horses. On several occasions, I've felt like witnessing an organized crime against horses. Interfering directly with the rider using unethical practices often leads nowhere else than to an aggressive reaction. Reporting non-horse-friendly riding to officials is stressful and frustrating because they hardly ever intervene. Reporting further up to the FEI is not useful either, as there is no response or a standard response saying the FEI does what it takes and that there is no problem. As long as the horse industry keeps denying there is a problem, nothing will be done to better protect the horses. So to prove there really is a problem, some of us go back to the competition grounds to film, to alert and to raise awareness. We also are active on social media because the equestrian media are not interested in giving us a voice, and because social media platforms are a very simple and free way to get the word out. That didn't go unnoticed by the professionals from the horse world using hyperflexion either, and tutorials and publicities of hyperflexed horses are flooding the internet. So we are here to give a minimum of opposition to that continuous hyperflexion propaganda too. At what point did I change from being a casual vet to a whistleblowing vet? My turning point was in 2018, during a visit to a world-famous institution. I saw several écuyers riding their horses in hyperflexion. I was shocked, disappointed, and angry, as these riders are supposed to be the guardians of classical French equitation, not copycats of competition riders. I tried motivating people to come with me to ask the institution to stop the use of hyperflexion, but everyone who had tried before me told me I was wasting my time. Anger and despair are strong motivators, but bad counselors. And instead of staying on my first idea to go talk to the staff of the institution, I launched an alert with the photos I had made. That was not a good basis for discussion with the institution, and I was depicted as someone with bad intentions, showing only the worst moments in time, which was not an intelligent reaction from the institution either. Using the moment in time excuse means, this is not okay. I finally met Mr. Patrick Galou, écuyer and head of research in the institution at that time, who had been trying to convince his fellow riders to stop using hyperflexion with scientific evidence, in vain. He organized a meeting on the 17th of July 2020 between representatives of the institution and the future founding members of the Collectif Pour les Chevaux. It was a very positive and constructive meeting. The écuyer chef at that time had said several of the solutions we had proposed were good and easy to apply. He had given us much hope. But the journalist I had invited did not publish any article, and the institution never publicly communicated about this meeting. It is as if it never happened, and any mail or letter was left unanswered ever since. Until yet another message sent several weeks ago to invite one of the guest speakers. This time, I finally got an answer after 2 long years. The guest speaker is present here today. Thank you for being here to help us better protect the horses. In the meantime, a high-level competition rider, client of the veterinary clinic I was working for close by this institution, was getting nervous as he uses hyperflexion and other forms of coercive riding himself. Him and some écuyers put pressure on my boss until she panicked and ordered me to leave the clinic or stop my actions with the collective. I did not give in to this intimidation to stop alerting on hyperflexion and left my employment. I decided to stop being a horse vet altogether. Being a small animal vet clears me from people imposing their code of silence on me. A few weeks later, after I had moved and changed my career from a horse vet to a small animal vet, one of France's most influential dressage tables, we will call them X-tables, shared a tutorial where we could see a 4-year-old broken in and trained like this. X-tables is led by an international 5-star FEI dressage judge and 2 international dressage riders. Any negative comments on their social media page are systematically removed and the authors blocked. This time, the comments had been massively pouring in, alerting on the presence of what was considered role cure, and I was asked to react. Why me? Because there is no one, no institution to turn to in these cases. By the time I got home from work, the video had been removed, which is of course a good thing, and the purpose of the people who had righteously criticized it. But we all knew there would be a lot of other hyperflexion videos coming up and a lot of horses trained in hyperflexion because of the examples they set. So I published an alert about the deleted video, accompanied by this tutorial from X-tables, still available on the net. The voiceover calls this an extension, says this posture can be maintained during a complete session, and that it is indispensable to train any horse. I alerted on the dangers of methodically riding horses behind the vertical and the inherent risk of abuse. In response to my alert, X-tables published an open letter on their social media page, a very smart text to shift the subject from the risk inherent in the systematic use of hyperflexion to their problem with people like me alerting on hyperflexion tutorials. It was written by someone who holds a master's degree in communication and of course followed by a massive wave of hatred towards me. The next day, X-Tables had been granted 2 articles in the biggest French online equestrian magazine. You know, one of those magazines who had been rejecting our demands to publish articles about the harmfulness of hyperflexion. The articles contained a lot of very heavily stigmatizing phrases towards all the defenders of horses who have been alerting X-Tables for years about their use of hyperflexion. It was clearly written to make us all feel guilty and shut up forever. The hyperflexion lip-sealing lobby worked on full speed, and another vague of hatred followed these articles. It was quite a traumatizing experience, like an extra-large reaction of what you usually get when you dare to speak up about a welfare issue in a riding school, boarding barn, or on a showground. As my name was visible, I should have had the right to answer. One of the journalists contacted me for an interview and told me it would be published in a few days. Days became weeks, and weeks became months. The article was never published, and I lost my right to answer, as you only have 3 months for that. And while I was waiting for my interview to be published, a bailiff clerk had come to my brand new working place to hand me the assignment of X-Tables who were suing me for defamation. This circus act could have cost me my new job if my bosses weren't so comprehensive and supportive towards my actions with the collective. The lawsuit took place in June 2021. The public prosecutor followed my lawyer, Nathalie Moulinas, concerning the formal defects she had raised, and advised the court to declare the trial null and void. The judge, nevertheless, was interested to hear both parties about the accusations. She was the one who used the term whistleblower when referring to the alert I had published. The public prosecutor concluded that my publication was not to be considered as defamation. Later on, the Belgian professor of law, Professor Dirk Voorhof of the Human Rights Center UGent, certified what follows, quote, "The criminal complaint and legal action by X-Tables against Eva Van Avermaet can undoubtedly be considered as a SLAP, strategic litigation against public participation, which is a form of abusive use of the justice system with the aim to intimidate, harass, or silence a critical voice that took part in a public debate or revealed illegal or unethical practices by institutions, public persons, corporate organizations, or private persons," unquote. Despite all this, and despite the promise of the chief editor, nothing has been published in that magazine, and my name is still left in the mud, where they threw it 2 years ago. In parallel to all this, I continued publishing information and alerts about the widespread use of hyperflexion by high-level riders, and about the propaganda spread by professionals and federations, which of course was systematically followed by denial of the persistence of hyperflexion by the French hyperflexion lobby, more aggressive reactions, some threats, and especially one very influential French judge and his little helpers doing everything they could to discredit me. Calling me an extremist is one of the most efficient strategies used. Who would listen to an extremist? With this very poor reputation and the knowledge that many of my colleagues use and advise LDR, I went to a conference for equine vets. This is a very sensitive subject. I'm on a slippery slope here. I went to that conference because I was worried about any further banalization of the use of LDR by the equine vets in France, and because I wanted to speak to one of the experts. During the first morning, we looked at several riders, most of them being vets themselves. Several of them held their horses with their nose clearly behind the vertical. I chose not to interfere and wait for the feedback of the experts the next morning. In the afternoon, there was a theoretical session. One of the experts was a former écuyer of the institution I was not precisely best friends with. It was quite a stressful situation. His presentation was excellent. He used pictures the same way we often do on social media to train the eye. The nose behind the vertical was systematically pointed out, even if it were only a few degrees. If I would have done this, I would have been called an extremist. The second morning, all the riders having their horses' noses clearly behind the vertical were told several times, the nose in front, but no one spoke of LDR nor hyperflexion, nor the risks of riding a horse behind the vertical. I waited until everyone had asked the questions they wanted to ask. Still no one talked about the fact we had seen several horses from vets being worked in LDR. So with my heart pounding out of my chest in front of these experts and 50 colleagues, I thanked the experts for having pointed out many important things, like training horses too young, riding them too roughly, and for having repeatedly asked to keep the nose in front. My voice surely trembled saying that, which is enough to label me as a hysterical person. I said I had heard them talking about smoke instead of using the word fire. I said what we had seen this weekend for several riders could actually be called hyperflexion, as hyperflexion is any neck flexion placing the nose of the horse behind the vertical. I added that if these riders go home without any explanation why working so clearly behind the vertical is not good for the mental and physical health of their horses, they will probably just continue as they did before. As those riders are vets, they won't have any reason nor argument to convince their clients not to use hyperflexion either. I was labeled radical in front of my 50 colleagues for having said hyperflexion begins from the vertical. But still, they promised me I would have 10 minutes to explain my point of view in the afternoon session. Then the écuyer, who had recognized my Flemish accent, asked me who I was. I said, Eva. That was enough information for him. Needless to say, I never got those 10 minutes to talk, and after a question I asked, I was told off and labeled extremist in front of my 50 colleagues. I still waited to be able to talk to the world-famous expert at the end of the conference, as some information in one of his less recent books is used by the hyperflexion lobby in France to claim that he advises the use of LDR. I thought it was important for him to know that. He seemed very worried and totally unaware which picture I was talking about. It's about this one. This picture and the text saying activation of the abdominals and relaxed top line. This picture shows a horse in excessive LDR with draw reins, a hand pulling backwards, impaired vision, impaired breathing, a contracted neck and blocked lumbar region, and strongly on the forehand. But who am I to speak up about the training methods of a world-famous star and the opinion of a world-famous expert? Following this conference, where I had several colleagues telling me, face-to-face of course, never in public, how brave and right I had been, I had sent a mail to those who had organized the event with the information I would have given in those 10 minutes they had promised. I received no answer from them, any of them. So I sent a mail to a colleague who was supposed to be concerned about horse welfare in France. I received no answer from him either, so I called him, explaining why I had contacted him. He would check his spam, end of the conversation. And I still did not get any answer. I'm used to not getting any response to mails and letters from the hyperflexion lobby, but ignored by colleagues. It's like back in the days when they said, "Hush, Eva, do your work and shut up." I will skip the details of the discussion that finally followed between the equine vets of France and me. It was disappointing. I felt there was an awful lot of bad faith in these mails. It was contemptuous. I was ridiculed, not taken seriously, and I was far from being alone to have that impression. It was clear to me that after the institution of the écuyers, the hyperflexion lobby, the equestrian media, my colleagues were also very methodically closing all doors on me. I have asked the equine vets of France if they could take position and warn against not only roll cure, but also the methodical use of LDR. Apparently they can't, because there would not be enough evidence of lesions caused by the use of LDR. But despite all that has happened, I have high hopes they will change their minds. Some of them are starting to see it's not about the messenger, it's about the message. Whistleblowers are determined people. They take personal risks to reveal practices. They consecrate their whole lives to find a solution, to put an end to something that has become impossible for them to further ignore. If you ignore a whistleblower, you just make him blow the whistle louder until you react and do something. I thank the journalists from the Danish TV station for their courage to get proof of what we all know. Many thanks to the undercover groom. Let's hope it will make things better for the horses at Helgstrands and elsewhere. I thank all those who have seen through the bad reputation the system had labeled me with. Thank you for not blindly following that system and for keeping an open and inquisitive mind. Thank you for the horses.